Well, good afternoon to you. It is 4:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. A lot of breaking news today. Of course, we got a brand new speaker, Mike Johnson. We'll keep covering the impact of that on Washington and our country. And we'll be chatting with Senator Ron Johnson coming up. As far as I'm aware, no relation, at 4:30. Curtis Houck is here at 5 o'clock from Newsbusters, and then at 5:30 from the Federalist, Margot Cleveland stops by. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL.
I want to be clear here. Nobody's turning a blind eye to Iran's complicity. Their support for these militia groups in Iraq and Syria, their support for terrorists throughout the region. We have addressed that through additional sanctions. We have addressed it through additional military force posture. We're obviously going to do what we have to do to protect ourselves and our troops.
That's John Kirby during the adult press briefing yesterday at the White House. And the reality here is that Joe Biden, when given the opportunity to go after and condemn Iran, hasn't really had much to say. In fact, he never mentions them when he talks about this conflict in the Middle East. But we have a report today that 24 American military personnel have been wounded just last week in a series of drone attacks at American bases in Iraq and Syria, according to U.S. Central Command telling NBC News yesterday evening. The Pentagon confirming the attacks last week, but the number of U.S. casualties was not until now previously disclosed. 20 American personnel sustained minor injuries on October 18th when at least 2 one-way attack drones targeted Al Tanf military base in southern Syria. According to CENTCOM, one of the drones shot down. All of the wounded personnel have been returned to duty, CENTCOM says, and there was no damage to any military installations. A perilous moment for the troops, and certainly Iran not slowing down its aggression. For more on this, let's get to Keith Kellogg. He's a retired 3-star Army general and a co-chair of the Center for American Security at the America First Policy Institute. General Kellogg, great to have you back with us, sir. Thank you.
Vince, thanks for having me. Good to be with you.
Do you find it odd that the Biden administration hesitates to talk about Iran's role in all of this?
No. Look, here's the reason I'm saying that. Vince, in June of 2021, I was thinking back, it was 5 months after Biden's inauguration. I was up at Fox for a Fox studio in New York for a special on the future of war, and I was part of a 3-person panel. And the last question to me was, what keeps you up at night? And I said, the will of talking about President Biden. I said, the will of the president to respond forcefully to protect U.S. citizens. Well, we're now at that culmination point. After 32 dead Americans, 12 being held hostage, U.S. forces in the region in the last 2 weeks, multiple attacks. Israel's under attack. And I look at the verbiage being used, and the strongest words are being made by his Secretary of State in the UN. It's not from the president. The president says things like, don't. I'm going to refer you to 2020, the State of the Union address by President Trump, when he said, if you attack our citizens, you forfeit your life. And he was talking about terrorism. That's how you respond to this as a president. And then you bring forces into the region, if necessary, and you respond that way. If you have to respond kinetically, you do it. And the reason we brought those forces in was not just to respond to prevent Iran from doing something really stupid with Hezbollah, who's a proxy with them, and also the Hamas. You know, they're the Quds Force commander, the guy that replaced Soleimani after we killed Soleimani, a guy named Ismail Ghani, is in Lebanon right now. He was there talking to Hezbollah and the forces around him. So Iran clearly has their handle on the terrorism tiller, a boat that's traveling around. We need to respond to it. We haven't, and I think we're at the culmination point, and it's game on, and we need to find out what's going to happen.
Well, I think you would agree probably that we have exactly the wrong administration in place right now for dealing with all of this, in light of the fact that you've got a lot of the members of the administration are very close to Iran. Including the Iran envoy, Rob Malley, who was suspended a couple months ago under mysterious circumstances. His security clearance was suspended, and the news for that broke in the Tehran Times. It turns out he had an entire network of people around him who were involved in Iranian influence operations. And this guy was working inside of the Biden administration, and not to mention, of course, Biden's effort to give money to the Iranians and additionally to ease up on the energy export sanctions that we've, as a country, imposed on them. It's like they're not working for us, are they?
No, you know, the biggest mistake they've made so far, at least to me, in that region is trying to normalize relations with Iran. Let me get this right. This was after the attack by Hamas into Israel. Their parliament chanted "Death to America, death to Israel." When people say things like that, you kind of have to believe them. And trying to normalize relations with a state like that, which is a terrorist state, which support terrorism globally, is a huge mistake. And I have no idea. It just scratches. I just have to scratch my head, Vince, when they do something like that. It just doesn't make sense to me at all.
Do you worry, General, about the extent to which the Iranians, the Chinese, and the Russians are beginning to work together? They have been now during the Biden administration, including through joint military exercises.
Yeah, I do, because they've come together. And what we tried to do in a previous administration was to keep them separate. You'd handle each one discreetly, but you'd make sure that each one was handled individually. And now you kind of put them in a barrel together, and it's a force of numbers. And now you've got Iran, you've got China, you've got Russia, you've got North Korea, all working together. And I think you're heading towards a large event, a culminating event, that you've got this entire group that's forcing in. They're going to pick the area they're going to fight into. That's going to cause us conflict in the region again. They look at us and they want us to have conflict in the region, meaning it makes it easier for them to operate, which is unfortunate, but it's a fact of life.
What do you make of the fact that we have now American military personnel have been injured, wounded by Iranian proxies, and it seems like I'm not even quite clear how we're responding to it. I can't help but notice that we are marking this week 40 years since the Hezbollah attack on United States Marines and the Beirut bombing. What do you make of this now? More military personnel being injured here.
Yeah, when we lost one American, it happened to be a contractor up in northern Iraq. That's the reason we took out Soleimani.
Yes.
Coupled with the fact that they're trying to take our embassy. Well, you have to respond. I think the fact that you've got 33 now dead Americans in Israel, with 12 being hostage, you've got no option. You're going to have to react somehow, somewhere, or make some hard decisions. So there's got to be some type of action taken. I mean, you just can't not do it for the message that you need to send to not only just the region, but your adversaries, be it Russia, be it China, be it North Korea, whomever's out there. It has to be done. And these attacks are going to continue, because we haven't responded. So they kind of see it as free game, and that's what they're going to keep doing.
I do think
that's how they operate.
It is. They're definitely sending a message about what they think of Joe Biden. It has to be, because after the Iranians and their organizations, the ones that they fund and back, have launched these attacks on Israel, this brutal terror attack, they decided they're still being chippy with American forces. Like they don't even seem bothered by the idea that they could possibly draw us into open combat. And that kind of says something about what they think of Biden, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. They believe he's not going to take any action. He's not going to make any decisive action, and he's always going to be able to explain it away. It's sort of like what's happened the last 3 years. You whistle past the graveyard, hoping nobody's going to take notice. You have to respond to these incidents very, very forcefully. My experience is, if you don't, it's like the bully in the playground. Somebody's finally going to have to punch the bully in the nose, or he's going to keep abusing the other kids. And this is the time we just have to punch the bully in the nose. And they need to figure out somehow how they're going to handle it and how they're going to do it. They've got the combat power if they want to do it.
Sure.
They've got the diplomacy ready to do it, but they're going to have to make a hard decision. And by the way, the only person who makes that decision under the Constitution and Article 2, Section 2 is the Commander-in-Chief, President Biden. It's on him. It's his call, nobody else.
Well, and obviously one of the considerations for any American commander-in-chief is how do we achieve our national goals while not drawing us into unnecessary bloodshed, right? That in order to prevent a wider war, for instance. But the Soleimani example is a good one, where we struck at Soleimani, we kill him, and we quieted Iran's aggression, at least for a time.
Well, we quieted because we told them what the follow-on was. We made a very clear message. And Mike Pompeo actually said that in a meeting I was at 2 weeks ago, when he was at a conference, and he said, and I was there when he said it, we picked up the phone and called our emissaries and the people who were helping us out, which were the Swiss and also the Russians. And we told Khomeini, the supreme leader, if you respond and you kill another American, we are coming for you. And here's the reason I tell people that they took it to heart. because people forget that 3 days after that call was made, after we killed Soleimani, the Iranians shot down a Ukrainian airliner coming out of Tehran. And through the intercepts, we picked up that they thought it was us coming for the supreme leader. That's respect and that's fear. But everybody forgets about that incident because it happened a few days later. But that's how you get your respect and your fear. They said, okay, they're serious about it. And if they don't believe you, Vince, that you're going to do something like that, they're going to continue to react. And I'll give you the out if you have to. Well, go for the secondary guy if you don't want to. Go get their Quds Force commander right now who's in Lebanon, Ghani. He's there. We did with Soleimani. You can do it with Ghani as well.
General Kellogg, we've been hearing from the White House they don't really know how many American hostages are being held and where they are specifically. Do you find it odd that we wouldn't have clearer answers on this question now this many weeks out from the attack?
You know, Vince, not really, because they've gone low tech on us. What I mean by that is they're probably the reason we didn't pick up on it. They're doing couriers, they're doing written stuff. They know that electronics will be picked up. They don't have a good human intelligence source. It looks like they're not using signals, so we don't have good signals intelligence. They've got a huge system of tunnels. They're moving people around, and that's what they're probably doing. It's hard to do it because if you don't have the human sources like the Israelis used to have, or the electronic sources, it's tough to pick them up. I hope what they're doing is they've really interviewed those that have currently been released and trying to figure out where they're at. But this is going to be a really hard nut to crack because they're going to be keeping them moving. And they realize how important hostages are for the bargaining process. I think the Wall Street Journal just came out with an article that they've delayed because of they delayed the attack into Gaza based on our request. I don't know how true it is, but I can see why this administration may have done it. And I understand, but they're going to have to let the Israelis go.
It really tells the story of why Hamas took hostages in the first place. They brutalized so many Israelis, but they took a lot of hostages as bargaining chips for what came next, and that's clearly what we're seeing right now. We have special operations guys who you are very familiar with, who are capable of doing this type of very high-stakes hostage rescue. Could you imagine that taking place, American special operations guys going in and saving Americans?
Yeah, I do, Vince, because we were very clear to the entire world, at least from the last administration, that if an American is taken, we don't care who you are or where you are, we're going to come and get them. Because an American's going to come get an American. And we were very clear about that to the entire world. So I wouldn't, and we don't really care what anybody else says. You know, what I mean by that is if you've got somebody that's one of ours, we're going to use our assets if we need to come get them if you can't do it. And we've got, to me, with SEAL Team 6 and Delta, they are world-class, supported by world-class aviation and rotary wing, and the command and control of JSOC is awesome. So to me, if they have an opportunity to do it, we'd probably, a previous administration, we would have done it. I don't know what they'll do this time.
General Kellogg, on that issue, were you troubled to see the White House apparently accidentally post a photo of members of Delta last week with the President of the United States when he was over in Israel? Somebody in that White House press office decided this was a good idea, exposed their faces, tattoos, everything about them. And then the White House, about an hour later, after millions had already seen the image, deleting it and then subsequently apologizing. Are you concerned about the operational security there?
Sure you are, and you're also concerned about their families. But here, Vince, when we used to travel in the Middle East, and we met a lot of our special operators over there, we would never, when I went with both the president and the vice president, we would never allow a photographer into the room, period. You wouldn't allow it to happen at all. You left your cell phones outside. When you went to talk to them, there's no photographers at all. That's the reason you never saw any of the photos coming out of the Middle East with the president and the vice president with our special ops guys. You know, you can take them when you're at Fort Bragg, but you sure can't take them when you're overseas. It was just stupidity. I think somebody wanted to be, really machismo about it. It was just a dumb move. Because, again, it's not only you put them at risk, but their families become at risk as well. And that's just something you just don't do. That was just dumb 101.
And it's a habit for these unfortunately, for these Democrat-controlled administrations. Obama did the same thing when they leaked all the details out of the White House in order to create a Hollywood movie about the Bin Laden raid. This is just the pattern. They seem to do this every time. All right, General Keith Kellogg, retired 3-star Army general. Thank you, sir. Really appreciate your time today and your wisdom as always. There's a report out this hour from Fox News, courtesy of Chuck Grassley, who is tenacious, isn't he? In digging into the Biden crime family. And now that we have a new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, maybe we'll be able to get the impeachment inquiry back up and running to dig in even more. Fox reports the FBI maintained more than 40 confidential human sources on various criminal matters related to the Biden family. 40 confidential human sources, including Joe Biden. These are not as a confidential human source, but his name is involved here in the allegations, dating back to his time as vice president, according to information just obtained by Senator Chuck Grassley. The confidential human sources provided criminal information to the FBI relating to Joe Biden, James Biden, and Hunter Biden. Those confidential human sources were managed by multiple FBI field offices across the nation, including the FBI's Seattle field office. But Grassley learned that an FBI task force within the Washington field office sought to, and in some cases successfully, shut down reporting and information from those sources by falsely discrediting the information as foreign disinformation. That effort caused investigative activity to cease. However, despite those efforts by the FBI task force, Grassley said in at least one instance, a confidential human source and its information had been vetted by multiple U.S. attorneys' offices, which found no hits to known sources of Russian disinformation. In other words, it was very likely real, not a Russian disinformation effort. The revelations were laid out in a letter that Grassley wrote to Attorney General Merrick Garland and FBI Director Christopher Wray late Tuesday night. That would have been last night. The letter was just exclusively obtained by Fox News Digital. Quote, based on the information provided to my office over a period of years by multiple credible whistleblowers, there appears to be an effort within the Justice Department and the FBI to shut down investigative activity related to the Biden family, Grassley wrote to Garland and Wray. Such decisions point to significant political bias infecting the decision-making in not only the Attorney General and the FBI Director, but also line agents and prosecutors. He went on, quote, our republic cannot survive such a political infection, and you have an obligation to this country to clear the air. Coming up, we're going to talk to another U.S. Senator, American patriot. Ron Johnson is going to be with us. We will talk about Biden family corruption, where we are, that $200,000 check that just appeared in public, the one that James Biden sent to Joe, and, of course, so much more. It's ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show. Good afternoon to you. 4:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up in the next hour, Curtis Houck will be with us from Newsbusters. That's at 5 o'clock. We'll discuss with him the decision by all of the major broadcast networks to ignore the anti-Semitism and pro-terror activities of the so-called squad in Congress. Meanwhile, George Santos even says a word in public. All those networks cover him. But not the squad. No, they'll cover up for them. And then Margot Cleveland joins us from the Federalist at 5:30. We'll get into a little bit more detail about this $200,000 check that James Biden gave to Joe Biden on the very same day that James took a loan from a health company called AmeriCorps to the tune of $200,000. You know, Biden's been insisting that where's the money? Where's the money? If you really think I'm corrupt, where is the money? Well, there's a $200,000 check with your name on it flowing to you. Seems like a big deal. Margot Cleveland will dive into the details with us there. I told you a few moments ago that Fox has a report up now, courtesy of Chuck Grassley, that the FBI got way more tips than we even knew about the criminality of the Biden family. Criminal information from over 40 different confidential sources on Joe, on Hunter, and on James. And let me just emphasize one thing here, and this is going to be a theme in our conversations this afternoon. James Biden, Joe's brother, has kind of flown under the radar, hasn't he? In terms of the way that he was using his access to his brother in order to enrich the Biden family. Hunter kind of gets all the attention because Hunter's the one with the laptop. Hunter's the one with all the crazy pictures and the hookers and the wild drug addiction stuff. So that's more splashy and tabloidy, I guess. And also he's Joe's son. He's accompanying him on all sorts of flights and including him in businesses where he gets 10% for the big guy. But James deserves every bit of the attention that Hunter's getting here. as we try and untangle all of the ways that the Biden family has turned this into a for-profit enterprise, their access to the federal government. So we're going to dig into that. We await Senator Ron Johnson. He's supposed to be joining us here, hopefully any moment now. And I want to dig into this with him because I do want to ask him about these latest reports with Chuck Grassley, what they're up to when it comes to the investigation, what he thinks of this new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and also what is going on with Israel right now and the United States involvement. Johnson's one of those guys that says that Israeli aid should not be a part of the same package as sending money to Ukraine. And he's totally right about this. The whole thing is insane. It's Joe Biden and Mitch McConnell who are putting forward this gigantic $100 billion package that lumps together every priority under the sun that these guys have, and then exploiting Israel to do it. So Israel suffers, Americans get taken hostage, Israelis get taken hostage, all sorts of people get murdered, to include both Israelis and Americans. And Joe Biden gives this big speech towards the tail end of last week, an Oval Office address of all things, where he declares that the most important thing we should be funding right now as a result of that attack on Israel is Ukraine. Is Ukraine. Something like $60, $70 billion out of the $100 billion that he's proposing to go to Ukraine? What are you, nuts? And if the majority of the package is to go to fund some other thing and not Israel, why isn't it being passed independently? Why do these things have to be tethered together? And the answer to that is so obvious. They know they can't get it through. They're not going to get a Ukraine funding package through Congress that easily. Not to that amount, and not with more accountability, and certainly not without actually securing our borders. One of the betrayals of many that's built into this funding package is $14 billion for border processing, not border security. They want more illegals to come into the country. $14 billion is built into this. McConnell's on board. Biden's for it. It's a total disgrace. And you really just don't, if you had a moment where you saw these headlines, oh, Joe Biden's going to have to build some walls, so maybe he's aware that securing the border is an important thing. Nothing like that's happening. It's just not, they have no interest in actually securing the border. In fact, they have been cutting through Texas's border barriers. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, whatever you think of him, and including if you think that he hasn't been tough enough on stopping the invasion of his state and by extension the rest of the country, he has had concertina wire, barbed wire, being put up on the border to try and stop people from coming into the country. They have these giant buoys that prevent human beings from climbing over them to get into the country. And the Biden administration has been ordering Border Patrol agents to cut through it all. You will not protect your state. You will allow illegal foreign nationals to pour into it, into the Lone Star State. And it's gotten so bad, it's gotten to the point now that the Texas state government, led by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton here on the legal side, is now suing the Biden administration. This came out yesterday, late yesterday. Texas has sued the Biden administration for the federal government's practice of cutting wire placed along the border by state authorities. Federal agents have implemented a policy of destroying Texas's wire to, quote, encourage and assist thousands of aliens to illegally cross the Rio Grande and enter Texas, according to the lawsuit. Republican Texas Governor Greg Abbott, the Daily Caller reporting here, recently instructed state authorities to place this barbed wire along the border in response to an increase of illegal crossings. Quote, by cutting Texas's concertina wire, the federal government has not only illegally destroyed property owned by the state of Texas, it has disrupted the state's border security efforts, leaving gaps in Texas's border barriers and damaging Texas's ability to effectively deter illegal entry into its territory, the lawsuit alleges. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton said in a statement Tuesday, the state has the, quote, sovereign right to construct border barriers to prevent the entry of illegal aliens. Americans across the country were horrified to watch Biden's open border policy in action, Paxton said. Agents were physically cutting wires and assisting the aliens' entry into our state. This is illegal, he says. It puts our country and our citizens at risk The courts must put a stop to it, or Biden's free-for-all will make this crushing immigration crisis even worse. Just a couple weeks ago, we saw video from the border where the administration forced the Border Patrol to cut the concertina wire again, and they allow a mass of humanity to just flow through. And as it happens, a Border Patrol agent fist bumps with an illegal alien coming into the country. You remember this video? It was captured by Jenny Terror, friend of mine, a guest of the show frequently from the Daily Caller News Foundation. She was down there on the border, and she saw a Border Patrol agent fist bumping illegal foreign national right as they crossed the border, right after the Border Patrol cut open the concertina wire at the direction of the White House, DHS. Now, what I'd like to believe, because we've certainly, we've talked to Brandon Judd and all the Border Patrol guys. We hear constantly from people who are tasked with protecting the border that most Border Patrol agents are not in the fist-bumping mood with illegal foreign nationals. But that was a troubling sign, wasn't it? It was like, welcome. I'll be your tour guide as you enter the United States of America. And the world is perfectly happy exploiting all of this. There's an Associated Press headline this morning that South American countries broadly are now using illegals as weapons. Weapons, that's their word, to force concessions out of Biden. Headline, Nicaragua is weaponizing U.S.-bound migrants as Haitians pour in on charter flights, observers say. That is Haiti, residents of Haiti, citizens of Haiti, are flowing into Nicaragua. And so now Nicaragua is using all of these illegal migrants as bargaining chips in order to force the United States to make various concessions to that. Usually means giving them money. Here's what the piece says. The headline, Mexico City. More than 260 charter flights believed to be carrying migrants from Haiti have touched down in Nicaragua in recent months. 260 charter flights. According to flight data and experts in the region, adding to an historic crush of migration by people hoping to reach the U.S. The flow of migrants has left the Biden administration and Latin American leaders scrambling for solutions. And experts say it's also being used as leverage by governments like Nicaragua's to get concessions from the U.S. amid tightening sanctions. Quote, the Ortega government knows they have few important policy tools at hand to confront the United States, so they have armed migration as a way to attack, said Manuel Orozco. He's the director of the Migration, Remittances, and Development Program at the Inter-American Dialogue. I love these randomly named organizations. This is definitely a concrete example of weaponizing migration as a foreign policy. Nicaragua, the AP says, has long been used as a migratory springboard for people fleeing struggling Caribbean nations like Cuba and Haiti, as well as countries as far away as Mauritania in Africa. That's a country with chattel slavery, because it's one of the few countries that doesn't require visas from any of them to enter. All right. Anyway, these countries are using all of these illegals as a way to force concessions at the Biden administration. And the Biden people keep falling for it, honestly. It's just remarkable. All right. We have now connected with Senator Ron Johnson from the great state of Wisconsin. He joins us on the phone right now. Senator Johnson, good to have you with us, sir. Thank you.
Good to be back. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing very well. Let me start with some breaking news out of your colleague, Chuck Grassley. I'm seeing it in Fox. The FBI has received criminal information, is the Fox headline, from over 40 confidential sources about Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and James Biden. It seems like the pile is just overwhelming in terms of the evidence against the Biden family, sir.
Yeah, again, Chuck Grassley has been a champion of whistleblowers during his entire career. And as former chair of Judiciary, he's fortunately had some whistleblowers come forward to his office, and they're, over time now providing more and more information about let's face it, the corruption of the investigation into Hunter Biden and the Biden crime family, including what potential connection Joe Biden has to this. They've just been pretty well prevented from really following the leads where the information would have normally led them.
It must be so frustrating, though, that you and Senator Grassley keep detecting that the Biden administration has been involved in covering all of this up or trying to mitigate the investigations into the Biden family. And yet these are the very same agencies that you're requesting information from. It must be so hard to trust even the things that you hear back from them.
Well, we don't from their leadership. I think, again, the whistleblowers, we need more of them.
Yeah.
If you'll notice, a lot of the information that is kind of cracking the case open in the House is coming from, for example, IRS whistleblowers. And then once you have some information, you can follow those leads into other areas as well. You can start subpoenaing different types of records. So you really do. If you're going to uncover the corruption, the partisanship, the fact that the left has infiltrated every institution in this country, but particularly government, you need people to come forward as whistleblowers. Unfortunately, we don't have enough of them coming from our federal health agencies on COVID. We've got some coming from federal law enforcement. We've got some coming from the IRS. I mean, that's a good thing.
Yes.
But we just need more.
You mentioned the House a moment ago, and I just want to ask you about today's breaking news. We do have a new Speaker of the House, Speaker Mike Johnson. As far as I'm aware, no relation to you, but he is. He's got a big job ahead of him. Are you encouraged that he's got the kind of the right ideas and the right focus in terms of not only becoming Speaker and leading the House through this moment, but conducting these investigations you're so interested in getting answers to?
Yeah, I'm glad the House came together, found a consensus pick. I have not dealt personally with Speaker Johnson in the past, like his last name. But I've certainly seen him question witnesses in hearings. He seems very articulate. I heard he's argued a couple of cases before the Supreme Court. You got to be pretty smart to do that. And I liked the letter he sent to his conference. I think this is before he got voted on. But talking about how are we going to get through all the appropriation bills, that he was open to a CR that would go to either mid-January or my preference would be mid-April, so we literally can give these appropriation bills more thought and scrutiny, maybe a couple at a time as opposed to just one or two minibuses or a great big omnibus. So it sounds like he's got a very practical approach to these things, and he's laying it out. He's showing people this is how we go about doing this, which is what we need out of leadership, rather than just bottle up your strategy and keep it all close to the vest. Actually lead by showing your conference this is the direction we're heading.
Yeah, I'm saying a lot of prayers that he leads the House in the right way. So, Senator, speaking of spending, last week Joe Biden made a pitch that apparently Mitch McConnell's on board with for $100 billion in new spending. They're exploiting, it sounds like, the tragedy in Israel, this terror attack, in order to give the majority of the funding in this new package to Ukraine. Why is this all lumped together? Why don't we see separate bills for these major issues?
Well, again, I talked about how grotesquely dysfunctional Washington, D.C. is, but they have a very finely honed process of plundering and mortgaging our children's future, and this would be one example of it. I think it's going to fail. Based on conversation to other colleagues, the very strong pushback, the strong support for Israel. The reality of the situation, I think getting this package through the Senate is going to be difficult enough. I think probably impossible through the House. For example, what the Biden administration is calling border security is not border security. It's billions of dollars to literally process and disperse illegal immigrants more efficiently, which is going to lead to even more illegal immigration when you have Hamas calling for days or probably weeks and months of rage. You think of the 1.7 million gotaways, there might be a terrorist or two. So I personally think the Biden request is dead on arrival, and I think Republicans will probably, I'm hoping, will hold together in the Senate, deny cloture to that kind of bill, and demand that we bring up and pass support for Israel, which has strong, maybe even unanimous support in the Senate and the House. Israel's going to need our help. Let's not bog down support for Israel by trying to tie it to packages that are completely either unpassable or certainly highly controversial.
Senator Ron Johnson, lastly, I know our time is limited, but you are on the Committee for Homeland Security in the Senate. Are you concerned right now about our Homeland Security, given that border being wide open and the obvious animosity that Iranian-funded terrorists, for instance, have for us?
Well, obviously. There have been, 1.7 million what they call known gotaways, but we don't know who these people are. We just know that they came across the border and we didn't even encounter them and process and disperse them. They're just in our country. 1.7 million since the start of the Biden administration. Over 150 countries, people have been coming across illegally. Hundreds of people on the terror watch list. So you've got to be concerned about that. Not only that, the flow of illegal drugs, the human trafficking, the sex trafficking. This is an unmitigated disaster. It's a crisis, but the Biden administration won't even call anything more than a challenge, and it's a challenge they're meeting by spending more money to disperse people more efficiently. It's pretty sick.
It is. It's very sick. Senator Ron Johnson, always appreciate your time. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. NBC News now reporting that Congressman Jamal Bowman, Democrat from New York, has now been criminally charged with a misdemeanor in connection with pulling a fire alarm in the congressional building on Capitol Hill last month. I'll have more details on that coming up in the next hour. Also, Curtis Houck is going to join us just minutes away. Margot Cleveland will also join us from the Federalist. We'll dive into that $200,000 check being exchanged by members of the Biden family. It's all ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Optima Tax